Welcome back to Knowledge is Kings, guys. I am Kings, and today we are working on a simple project that uses a minimal amount of wood, but it has a maximum visual impact. Wow, that sounds lame. I'll edit that out later. Today we'll be making a leaf-shaped charcuterie board. Also, stick around to see a mistake I made in terms of safety so you can learn from my mishap. To get started, I just grabbed some of the small scrap pieces I happen to have lying around that were in no way staged right there for easy grabbing. I ripped the maple pieces down to 1 inch and the black walnut down to 1/4 inch. For this cut, I marked the left side of the blade as I cannot safely cut a 1/4 inch piece between the fence and the blade. I then need to move the fence after each cut, moving the piece to the line I made on the left side. They also make jigs I could buy that work the same way and are a little more accurate at getting the same size pieces. I cut all the walnut pieces to length and put them between the maple boards so I could measure the height to make sure that I cut enough pieces to get the total width I needed. Then I trimmed the maple to the same length and it was time for glue up. Whenever I'm making a project that comes into contact with food, I need to have a food-safe glue. This type bond 3 is safe for indirect food contact. I only need to glue one side of each board, but with enough glue that there is some glue squeezing out. If I don't see any glue coming out when I clamp it together, chances are I didn't put enough glue in. I don't want a ton of squeeze out because that just means I put too much in and I'm wasting glue, but I want a small waste is much better than not enough glue. Once the glue is dried, I run it through my drum sander. Then I just try to cut a 45-degree angle so that both pieces are equal. I cut on that line on the table saw, but with a small miter jig, it's hard to get the cut perfectly straight. So I'll take it over to the joiner to make the edge perfectly straight, flat, square, and whatnot. For the center of the board, I was planning on just having a straight piece for the stem, but then I thought an angled one would look more leaf stem-like. So I just cut 2 angles on the bandsaw, then it's back to the joiner to true up both edges. Whenever I glue up end grain like this, I put a fair amount of glue on the end grain and let it sit for just a little bit to allow the end grain to absorb some of the glue into the fibers. And then I also put glue on its mating pieces as well. If I only put glue on one side like I did in the first glue up, I will have a much weaker joint. End grain joints are notorious for being very weak, so I want to strengthen them if at all possible. This is a very small project, so I'm not too worried, but if it were anything larger with end grain, I would add biscuits or dowels or something to strengthen the joint even further. Once that was glued up and dried, I ran it through the sander again and then traced my leaf pattern on there. You can see my original leaf pattern was a lot smaller and the shape seemed to have more wasted wood, so I made it bigger and changed the shape a bit. Unless it is for a specific customer, never be too rigidly set on your original plan. Change things up as you go along to suit your fancy. That's just you woodworking. Making my pattern out of something thicker than paper would have probably been a good idea. I basically had to shade around the design as the paper wouldn't resist my pencil at all. Then it's back to the bandsaw. I try to get close to the line, but as I will need to sand it, I want to keep the line there so I have something to sand to. On the one side, I didn't want to get too close to the handle, so I left a little on there. I'll just chisel that away later. Then it's off to the belt sander. Any parts I can't reach there, I'll finish up at the oscillating spindle sander. I just try to get it sanded to the line, but I don't worry about being super precise. I more care about it being smooth and looking uniform. No one will notice if one side is a millimeter different than the other side. In woodworking, as with most things, it doesn't pay to chase that last 1% to be 100% perfect. Then I sand everything with the random orbital sander. All the sanding I have done can be done by hand or with a random orbital sander. So if you want to make one of these, don't freak out if you don't have the other big sanders. Those just help make the work go faster. Once I have it pretty well sanded, I mark where I want the handle to be, but I don't cut it out just yet. I want to round the corners first, and it'll be easier to do that if the handle isn't cut yet. I soften the corners with a 3/16 round over bit in the router. Now to cut out the handle on the bandsaw, I needed to leave square with a table, so I used a couple of clamps to hold it. It would have been almost perfect if the table didn't have the little grooves for the clamps to fall into, but they did the trick. I leave the clamps on for the next step on the oscillating spindle sander as well. Remember this part at the belt sander, I'll come back to it in a moment. Once that is all smoothed out, it's back to easing over the corners, but this time I use my much smaller Makita Cordless palm router since it can get into tighter spots. That means less hand sanding. And now for the finish sanding, which is not that fun to do and even worse to watch. It's basically the gulf of woodworking. So I'll skip ahead. Once it's all smoothed over, it's time to add the oil. I used food grade mineral oil. Now I want to add enough oil to cover everything, but not so much that the United States Army decides to invade my shop. Once that's all soaked in, I add some homemade cutting board wax. I put it on and let it sit for a while, then rub off the excess. Add some feet and it's off to my laser for my logo. Now before we get into the glamour shots, you remember the belt sander? This is how I sanded the edge on the second take. You see how the point is pointing in the direction of the belt? Yeah, that's how it should be. Now let's see what happens when I forget that rule. This is the first take. Pay attention to the sharp point going against the direction of the belt. This is a safety hazard that I forgot about. The belt then wants to grab that wood and pull it in, as it did, and cause the paper to tear. Look how fast I pulled my hand away though. It was a millisecond before that speeding paper would have collided with me. And that was a brand new belt. Yeah, you'll have that on these big jobs. Anyway, on to the glamour shots. Whoa, 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 wrong file, wrong file.
Oh, the horror!
1 second here. Okay, here they are. So that's it for this week's project. Now I want to go over a common woodworking myth. I hear a lot that you need to run all of your pieces over a joiner before you glue them together. This was actually how I was taught in woodworking back in high school, a few years ago. But take a look at the close-up of this project. There are absolutely no gaps, and I did not put any boards through a joiner after ripping them on the table saw. If you properly push them through, they should be straight enough to glue them together without joining them. I also think that the surface being a little rougher allows for a stronger joint. There are a bunch of other factors than just pushing it through correctly that can lead to cuts that aren't true enough to go straight to gluing, but I'll have to make a separate video on using a table saw for that. But I just want to kill the notion that you can't get good glue joints if you don't have a joiner. No, I can hear the people in the comments already, but Kings, I saw you use a planer to make this project, which is true, but not necessary. I just hate the thought of aspiring woodworkers foregoing a project because they think they can't do it without some special equipment. You can do any project with just basic hand tools. It will just require more time. A piece of sandpaper clamped to your workbench could also be all you need to true up a slightly rough cut. Is it the quickest way? No, but if it allows you to complete a project, it's the perfect way. Anyway, I'll get down now. I hope you enjoyed this simple project. Don't forget about our 10,000 subscriber Makita giveaway. All you need to do to enter is to be subscribed. Details are in the description. So with that, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button as it really helps the channel. And we'll see you in the next one.
Oh, I like that.